To frame our conversation, I thought what might be useful for the audience was to understand for financial services in general, why should they use social media? How should they think about content marketing?
We need to be in this space because our customers and our potential customers are in this space. BT is obviously a company that has many parts. We have corporate clients, we have retail clients, and we have a big advisor part of our business. And we know that all of these aspects of our business are communicating and want to communicate with us via content and social media. So I think it's fair to say that BT is quite new in this space, but we are embracing it enthusiastically. We're also learning a lot about what our customers want. Actually talking to a member of our digital team who's saying, say test and learn. And it is true. You know, I was speaking to Rob, who's head of Adobe, and he said 98% of everything that we do is a mistake. And I really loved it when he said that. And he said, we test everything, everything. And I think that that's a really good mantra to apply if you're working in content marketing or social, in the finance space right now, to test everything. Because we could be pumping out content and communication. If it's not what our customers or our clients want, then we're completely wasting our time. So, yeah.
Okay. So, you know, obviously, I thought we'd spend some time talking about your brand. We were talking earlier, and you're talking about the fact that BT Financial went through a brand refresh maybe about a year ago, made yourself more accessible, used sentiment, and also all the digital tools that you were using. Perhaps if you could walk the audience through the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, 15 months ago, we refreshed our brand. We launched a new website, bt.com.au, and there was definitely a decision made at that time to be much more retail-facing. And behind the reason for doing that was that we wanted to really be an accessible expert, to take our expertise to our customers, but also to be open to understanding and listening to what they wanted. And so the website was really a big change for us. And in fact, we raised our traffic by 66% in 15 months, which is now, I think, at about 1.4 million a year. So that was a big result, and that was a risk for the business. We weren't sure how that was going to go. And at the same time, the idea of being an accessible expert fed through into our strategy. So a lot of the content that was on our new website was empowering and inspirational. It was really interesting to hear Jennifer talk about transparency, authenticity, and trust, and relevancy, which are at the heart of a great content strategy. But further to that, I actually believe that unless we're adding value, if we're not empowering our customers to create a better financial future for themselves, then again, we should probably reconsider what we're doing. And so the brand campaign that went with that refresh was prepare for the best. That was what we tried to do. And we also have launched since then many other channels. We've just launched a custom YouTube channel. We have a Facebook channel. I personally launched the BT Insights blog. So we now have many different ways of talking to our customers, giving content, serving it up in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that sort of segues nicely to the next part. I think your social strategy, and specifically, I think Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, maybe giving people a better sense of how you're leveraging all this content that you're creating. You touched upon it, but we have a couple of slides over here which we thought could be educational in sharing that.
Our channels perform for us in different ways. Twitter is a very strong channel for us. Facebook, obviously, our content going out perhaps to a younger audience. And so we are creating content with different demographics or different tone of voice, different style, depending on what channel that is going out. And we have a strategy where we look at all of that and we're measuring it constantly. So what is the data? What is it telling us? What are our customers responding to? What do they like? What do they not like? What's working for us? What's not? YouTube, we just launched. We make 40 videos a year. So that's quite a lot of videos, I would say, for a finance house. We're just short of 600,000 views in about 16 months since launch. I love video in terms of content marketing. It's one of the central parts of our strategy. I think that we know that video is on an almost vertical trajectory in terms of engagement and sharing. It's incredibly adaptable. We can use it on our blog, we can use it on our Facebook, we can put it on our website, we can send it through EDMs. So video is a very powerful part of our content strategy. And something that I feel strongly about is that video very much can capture what I call the power of the personal story, where you get to talk to people about their real experiences with money and finance and perhaps how they found solutions for themselves. One of the things I learned, I come from a publishing background, that if you put the words real life in front of any article, that you got 40% more readership. We want to know how other people have done things. That's how we learn. And video is a format that we find highly appealing in terms of storytelling. Content, actually, no matter what channel you do it through, is about storytelling. So compelling storytelling that fits the channel that you're working with needs to be at the core of what you're doing.
So when you look at the Insights blog itself, I think one of the challenges in chatting with a lot of marketers, not just from financial services space, is around, how do you refresh it? When you think about the content, what kinds of content are you focused on? Could you talk us through the BT Insights blog and what you had in mind when you guys created it?
Well, I launched the blog because I'm passionate about blogging, and I know that blogs are incredibly important, and I would say should be at the core of a content marketing strategy. We use a hub and spoke model where we create and publish content on the blog, and then we push it out via our different social media channels, and our website. So by therefore creating a content matrix. Blogs create 60% greater traffic to a website, even if you don't publish very often, actually. Blogs are the widest funnel that you can have in order to draw potential clients to your products and to your website. The great thing about having a company blog is that we can talk with many different voices. We can show the face of BT, and we can also say things that we can't say on the website. So we're slightly off-brand in a sense. The blog allows us to be, what I like to say, response-able in a way that often finance companies, I'm sure a lot of people in the room will know what I'm talking about here, finance companies can be slow to respond to what's actually happening in the market. I can get a story live on the blog within 25 minutes. So that is a way. Another thing is we know that advisors use our content on the blog for their clients. So it's a great solution for them also.
Well, the next thing I want to help you sort of talk us through is your strategy on LinkedIn. So you've been partnering with us. You've done some amazing things. Could you give the audience a sense of what has worked for you? What are the things you're still experimenting with? How has the journey been for you so far?
Referring to the lady that was talking from HSBC, LinkedIn is a great platform for us because it's a professional network. We know that people on LinkedIn are highly engaged. There's a lot of sharing of content. They're there because they want to be reading the content that's there. So there's a great match. We also know that people who are doing research, so all of the things that were talked about before. And it would be fair to say that we're also learning about how our content is performing on LinkedIn. We've also had surprises. One of our best stories was, what is a stay-at-home mum worth? And that was one of our highest rating stories. Another really highly engaged story was how to marry for money. And I personally read that story many times, but which was actually about seeing a financial advisor. So I think LinkedIn really gives us the opportunity to see what content is trending for us, what does well for us, and it gives us reach that we couldn't have. I'm not sure what the stat was, but 63,000 people have seen our content that we couldn't have reached.
And when you think about the specific tools on LinkedIn, I mean, we're talking about your company page here, but then also sponsored updates. How do these sort of play with each other and with your blog? And how do you think about it from a content strategy perspective?
Well, obviously, the purpose of using LinkedIn and sponsoring updates is ultimately to drive people back to us, and so to actually hopefully buy our product or to start a conversation. But there are other important things. We want people to know about us, what we stand for, our values. We also want to increase brand awareness. We want people to know that we know what we're talking about in this space. Lots of different reasons for using content in that way. But ultimately, it's to get people to come back to us as a company and hopefully to spend money with us.
In terms of just the tactics of putting together long-form content on a blog versus, like in a sponsored update where you're actually trying to drive traffic, to your point, to either the blog or to the company page on LinkedIn, how do you sort of think about that? There's one thing to do a catchy headline. That's very different from doing a thoughtful, long-format piece. So I think when people are dipping their toe into the water of content marketing, that's one of the challenges they tend to face.
I'd have to say, Harry, that I think if you're doing content marketing and you are spending money and you should have someone who is very good at being able to do that well. But yes, great headlines, great sales, great pictures, knowing what people want to read, knowing what's trending. I mean, I have 20 years in publishing. I think I know what people want to read, mostly. Sometimes I get it wrong, but I do think I know what people want to read. And I also think that it's very important that if you're doing content in the finance space, that you understand that the same rules apply, that if you were on Yahoo or buying Women's Day, I want content to be compelling and engaging and give me value, regardless if it's about superannuation or if it's about where I should go next weekend. So, using great journalistic techniques, company thinking of itself as a publisher, not just a finance company that's pushing out content, all of these things are very important.
So you used the word influence, and I think one thing that was interesting earlier, we chatted about the whole concept of ROI, and you called it return on influence. Do you care to elaborate on that?
The elephant in the content marketing room is how do you actually justify the spend on content when still, to a great extent, it hasn't necessarily been proven, the link between that and return on investment, actual hard sales. But how we measure content is obviously traffic and likes is super important, but we also want people coming to us who are the right. You can have thousands and thousands of people on Facebook, but if they're not the people who actually want to engage with your company, then that's not very satisfactory. Engagement is important, time spent, sharing. If people are sharing our content, then we know we're doing a good job. But the fourth thing, which is often overlooked, is sentiment. Finance companies often are not liked. Banks are generally not particularly liked. There can be a lot of hatred on Facebook and LinkedIn for banks and finance companies. So I think what I'm also interested in measuring is how is the content that we're publishing improving how we stand in the face of our customer, and not just our customer, our potential customers. And I think that also comes back to relevance, authenticity. I think one of the big lessons for BT and also the bank is to understand that customers want truthful communication about what's happening, even if that's not necessarily good. So if there's volatility in the market, for example, they actually want to know what that really means for them. And so social media and content marketing gives us an opportunity to engage in a way that I do think is more transparent than we've had the chance before. That raises sentiment, and the brand is thought of better. So sentiment, a very important measurement for us.
One additional study, I think it's a HubSpot study if I was right, you quoted, where it talked about the fact that content is, over a long period of time, turns out to be is more inexpensive than SEO.
Paid SEO. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm a passionate content marketer, but one of the things I love about content is that it's relatively cheap compared to the many hundreds of thousands of dollars you might spend on other types of campaigns. And what we know about content is that it's a slow burn. It takes investment and time, but it performs in the long run. So yes, correct, that content published regularly actually outperforms paid SEO over 4 years. Now, obviously, SEO and content have to work together, and that's a relationship that you have to get right in your content strategy. But content is incredibly good value for money. Even video can be incredibly good value for money. I think that that's a message. You know, finance companies do tend to have a bit of money to spend when it comes to campaigns. So I would personally like to see more understanding of the value that content can bring. Yeah.
So when we were chatting outside, you made this statement which sort of reminded me. I was on a panel earlier, I think it was late last year, and I was sitting with this gentleman from Intel, and he was talking about the fact, and I was actually with Intel and BBC, and we were talking about content marketing. And Intel talked about the fact that they've essentially created a publishing division where they're generating content at scale and figuring out distribution channels, including LinkedIn, and so on. And it was an interesting debate to see the BBC and Intel, something I didn't think I'd ever experienced, debating about content creation and dissemination. So, but you mentioned outside that companies, and particularly in the financial services space, they need to start thinking about themselves as publishers almost. How do you recommend they sort of take a step in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great quote that I read. It's just not enough to make a decision that you want to do some content marketing. You actually have to have a full publishing strategy. And I was recently at the Content Marketing Institute, and something that's happening more in the States is the idea that content marketing has to step out of sort of a cupboard in the marketing department and actually have an overarching view of all marketing, be it part of all marketing. Because essentially, it should be at the heart of everything that we're doing from a marketing point of view. And definitely, I know in the States, there's a move towards creating content marketing departments with a head of content that looks over everything. Are we ready for that here yet? I think there are some bigger companies here who are taking steps towards that. Remarkable to think that the BBC is talking to corporate about publishing, and I think that really shows you where we're at. But I think that there needs to be an infrastructure within companies. I come from a magazine background where everyone in the building is focused towards one thing, which is getting the magazine on the racks and getting it sold. And I think it's a new idea for companies to consider that their success might actually sit on how many people are reading their content. It's a big 180 for companies to think about. But I'd definitely say that's where we're headed.
I think the one commonality that came out of that conversation was that content creators as well as brands are all targeted on the same audience. I mean, they're trying to get to this audience. And one of those audiences that was referred to earlier, the research that we talked about with high net worth individuals, you were mentioning that you'd also done some work around how high net worth individuals research products online before actually making a purchasing decision.
Yeah.
Is that something that could be useful for this audience?
Yeah, well, I mean, we know that, we have very savvy clients who have done the research before they come to us. I mean, some other recent research, I'd say we have a big advisor base. In recent research in America shows that advisors who use social media actually make $1 million more profit than the people who don't. For BT as a company, we're a superannuation and wealth company. Everyone from 18 to 80 could fall into our customer base that we're talking to. And so the question for us is, how do we then communicate through all these different channels to people who are perhaps very financially savvy and who have done all the research, or people who are beginners? How do we create the user experience, the journey through our digital and social channels to basically nurture all of that, so that we're there for the people who are smart and engaged and informed, and we're there for the people who are just starting out and are perhaps 18 and don't have any idea what a superannuation account is, or who are interested in share trading but have no idea where to start. So I think something that we're working on really strongly at the moment is how do we talk to all of these people and be available to all of them and give value to all of them through our different channels, and how do we work to make that a satisfactory experience. And we're definitely still learning about that, no question about it. We also only, as a company, we don't have much direct product. So a large percentage of people that are coming to us for information. So we know that. Whether that information is useful for them or not is something that we are beginning to take attention to now.
Makes sense. So I'm going to leave about 5 minutes for Q&A. So I have one sort of final question, and then so get your questions started in your heads. But I think the question I had for you was, in this particular industry, a big part of the lives of all professionals in financial services is risk mitigation.
Yeah.
And social, everyone's read the headlines, what happens if you don't manage your social strategy well. Any advice? I think we're all figuring it out together, but any advice that you've learned through your experience over the last several years?
Yeah, I mean, I first joined an investment bank 3 years ago, and I set up the social media strategy there, and obviously they were terrified. They were absolutely terrified. I think things have changed a lot in those 3 years, but obviously, engage risk and compliance, have a structure, be very clear about how things get posted. I mean, I feel that probably most people in the room would know this, but everyone has to feel happy and comfortable with what's happening. But I also think that the nature of social is that it is evolving all of the time. And so just as you think you have everything covered, then something else happens that you weren't prepared for, that there wasn't a contingency for. But yeah, I work in a very, very risk-averse and compliant universe in terms of work. Is it a struggle and a challenge? Absolutely, yes, it is. Am I always pushing the boundaries with the legal team? Yes, I am. Do I always win that? No, not always. If you have a risk framework in place, then you're a long way ahead. So I would say start with the risk framework, and then go on with the social media, rather than learning from very expensive mistakes.